Welcome to the Tales of the Realm, a series where we recount a great many tales from the world of Final Fantasy XIV. In this video, we're going to be revisiting the tale of the Crystal Tower, the first Alliance raid in the game. Originally presented as a part of A Realm Reborn's optional endgame, the Crystal Tower has now become a mandatory undertaking for anyone planning to progress through the game. So, getting a good grasp on its story sounds like a good idea. As a tale of elegant ingenuity and hubris, as well as personal challenges and growth, the story of the Crystal Tower really adds to the legacy of the Final Fantasy series, from which the tower has been plucked. So let's have at it. I'm Peter from Birds of Play, and in this video, I hope you'll join me as we revisit the complete story of the Crystal Tower. If you're in the market for some more retellings of classic Final Fantasy XIV stories, or just some Final Fantasy content in general, don't forget to show your support by subscribing to the channel and help us climb those heights. Every single step counts. It's going to be a long climb up the tower, but I hope you'll be with us every step of the way. For several millennia, the Crystal Tower remained hidden, buried deep underground. But, like so many other things that were better left undisturbed, the structure was freed from its stony prison by the great upheaval which accompanied the coming of the Seventh Umbral Era. It now stands revealed in all its splendor, a gleaming spear of crystal, pointed at the bosom of the heavens. Furthermore, as a testimony to elegant ingenuity, even the unruly passage of time has not managed to dull the tower's formidable defenses, much to the dismay of scholars who had hoped to examine the tower's innards, assuming them to be a repository for much of the ancients' wisdom. The first obstacle to overcome on the way to the tower being the 8 Sentinels, a collection of statues carved in the likeness of giant swordsmen, each 2 statues projecting an impenetrable barrier. The road the statues guard present the only path available, since any airship that dares to venture too close to the tower is blasted out of the air, leaving the tower beyond their reach. With the help of the adventurer who saved the realm, Cid Garlond is able to devise a plan to pierce the Crystal Tower's defenses. But as they set out, they are joined by Biggs and Wedge, engineers working for Garland Ironworks, who have come to lend a hand. After all, it's not every day one gets a chance to study the wonders of the ancient Allagan Empire, whose technology puts that of the Gallian Empire to shame. Cid appreciates their enthusiasm, but cautions them they are not there to lay claim this knowledge for themselves, since the realm has already suffered enough on account of men drawn to the promise of unimaginable power, leading them to meddle with technology they do not understand. Cid asks Wedge to recite the company creed, which he does, exclaiming, "Freedom through technology," reminding them all that the purpose of their efforts is not tyranny through technology, and that even the wonders of the all-knowing Allagan Empire could not save their own civilization. This means that depending on what they find, they must be ready to seal away the tower's secrets, if necessary. Before the expedition can begin, they are joined by yet another lively character, as a red-haired Mikote jumps into the fray, introducing himself as G'raha Tia. Rambros, an anthropogeographer from Sharlayan who oversees the expedition, explains G'raha has been assigned to the project as an observer and hopes the rest of the party will welcome him as one of their own, despite his eccentricities. Having been accepted into the group, G'raha lets out 3 cheers for Noah. Noah being the name he has chosen for the little collective, an acronym of Nominated Observers of Artifacts Historical. although his true reason for choosing this name stems from the fact it is shared by a vaunted Allagan archmagus, G'raha being a historian specializing in ancient Allag. They depart at last, and Cid, who has been there before, leads them through a gate to the steps of the 8 sentinels. G'raha notes that the energy radiating from the statues is palpable. Having come prepared this time, Cid uses a crystal fang of his own design to render the barrier inoperational. Cid insists on testing it himself, not being willing to put anyone else in harm's way on account of his invention. And thankfully, the gamble pays off, letting him dispel the barrier. Afterwards, they take turns dispelling each barrier as they come to it, leaving the last one to the adventurer. With the barriers dispelled, they are free to venture closer to the Crystal Tower. In order to guarantee their safety, however, Cid suggests that the adventurer scouts ahead before the rest of them follow suit. G'raha reluctantly agrees to Cid's proposal, even though he would much rather brave the way to the tower's entrance along with the adventurer. Before the adventurer sets out, G'raha nevertheless gives the adventurer a lesson in what to expect, as he informs him that the base of the tower is surrounded by a maze known as the Labyrinth of the Ancients. The adventurer enters the labyrinth along with a party of like-minded heroes, and upon ridding it of hostile elements, he contacts the others via link shell, telling them to come join him inside. G'raha is impressed by the adventurer's fortitude and tells him that as a historian, he is sure his name shall be writ large in volumes that are sure to be penned on this historic expedition. G'raha goes on to explain that according to the findings of the Baldesion colleagues, the Crystal Tower was constructed to collect and store the endless energies of the sun, explaining the structure's great size. As the young historian inquires about the opposition the adventurer faced along the way, G'raha is furthermore able to offer some insight into the identity of the adversaries now laid low, explaining that the giant man he came across wielding a shimmering scimitar must have been a hero of the Allagan Revolution named Phlegethon. Cid is impressed by G'raha's deductions, but upon further questioning, all that G'raha divulges is that he has a certain affinity for the lore of the Allagan Empire, gleamed from musty scrolls and tomes. With the passage to the foot of the tower now unobstructed, the members of the expedition retreat momentarily to regain their bearings. Upon discussing the matter, Cid is alarmed by the opposition the adventurer faced in the Labyrinth of the Ancients, since it seems to allude to the tower not simply having been thrust above ground by the chaotic shifting of Earth brought on by the descent of the lesser moon. Rather, the Crystal Tower seems to somehow have been reawoken. Cid becomes increasingly worried that the tower's secrets will prove too dangerous to share with the world, which will leave them no choice but to contain them, returning the tower to a dormant state. As they prepare for the next expedition to the Crystal Tower, G'raha informs them that he must take time away from its study to hone his martial prowess, so that he may truly witness this valiant tale unfold with his own eyes. Rambros reminds him that his knowledge may prove invaluable to Master Cid's investigation, so he cannot simply do as he pleases. G'raha pouts at the prospect of having to once again prioritize his scholarly pursuits over his dreams of following in the footsteps of the adventurer. In the dark of night, a mysterious masked figure approaches the Crystal Tower, taking advantage of the expedition already having disabled the defenses. The man reveals himself to be none other than Nero Tolskaiva, former tribunus of the 14th Imperial Legion of the Gallian Empire, and Cid's former associate. Having been denied victory by the adventurer during Operation Archon, he views the Crystal Tower and the power resting within as an even greater prize, the fire of his ambition still burning bright. As the party resumes the expedition, they come upon a great and impenetrable golden gate that bars them entry into the tower proper. As G'raha arrives, he is accompanied by Une and Doga, fellow scholars of ancient Alag, sent by their friends of Baldesion to aid in the investigation. Cid welcomes their assistance in circumventing the tower's defenses so that they may enter the Circus Tower, the principal spire of the structure collectively known as the Crystal Tower. Une and Doga prove their usefulness right away by unlocking the gate with their ether, letting it open of its own accord, and thereby accomplishing that which Cid could not. This feat leaves the expedition stunned. But before they can press Une and Doga for answers, Nero arrives on the scene, reciting ancient poetry that might illuminate them as to the identity of the mysterious duo. Cid is shocked to see Nero still alive, but Nero assures him he is no longer a threat to his cause, having been exiled from Garlemald after the defeat of his legion. Cid isn't so gullible as to just take his word for it, but as a gesture of goodwill, Nero shares with them what he knows about Une and Doga. He tells them that as a symbol of ancient Alag's might and prosperity, entry to the Crystal Tower is only permitted to royalty and a select few individuals, royal blood being needed to open the gate. According to Nero, however, Une and Doga are not but imitations of Allagan royalty, living keys, born of Allagan ingenuity. In other words, clones. Upon hearing the truth, Une and Doga dare not conceal it any further and apologize for their deception. They hope to share more of their knowledge with the expedition and pray they return to the 8 Sentinels. Nero nonchalantly follows suit, but Cid confronts him since he has little reason to trust him. In the hope of winning him over, Nero presents Cid with an Allagan tombstone that holds the information he just shared with them, and a great deal more. Before leaving, he tells Cid that he looks forward to working with him. Back at the 8 Sentinels, Doga reiterates that they are in fact clones, copies of people who once existed, given life through Allagan technology. At the risk of offending them, Rambros asks for what purpose they were created, and what they had hoped to accomplish by taking part in their expedition. In order to answer his question, Doga believes they must first revisit Allagan history. Une and Doga tell them a tale of the Allagan Empire back at its zenith, when the Crystal Tower stood tall as the symbol of Allagan pride, and when parents took their children there so that they might learn how the nigh limitless energy it produced brought prosperity to the whole empire. That prosperity, however, bred decadence, and the empire began to show signs of stagnation. This decline was made all the more rapid for want of a strong leadership. In a matter of generations, the Allagan civilization became a pale shadow of its former self. Its once cleaving cities fell into despair, and its frontier lands were given over to the wilderness. Lamenting the pitiful state of affairs, one technologist made it his mission to restore Allag to greatness. Amon was his name, and he believed that the ailing empire wanted for naught but a potent ruler. And none was more potent than its founding father, Emperor Sande, whom he sought to resurrect. As a part of his experiments, Amon created clones of the empire's descendants, Une and Doga being products of that experiment. Rambros is reminded that historical texts mention the reigns of 2 Allagan emperors named Sande, although the true connection between the two had eluded scholars until now. In his previous life, Emperor Sande decided to bring the entire world under Allagan dominion, an ambition that ultimately went unfulfilled. Having been granted a second chance, he was determined to succeed. Realizing that he needed more power to wage his war of conquest, Sande turned his sights towards a forbidden source, darkness. In order to learn how to harness this power, he converted the Crystal Tower into a restricted research facility. Upon hearing all of this, Sid takes solace in knowing that Sunday is long gone. But Doga explains that Sunday does in fact still live, and that within Circus Tower, his ambition burns all the brighter. He goes on to explain that wielding the power of darkness required vast amounts of energy that not even the Crystal Tower could produce. In order to increase energy production, Dalamud, the Lesser Moon, was launched into the heavens to gather the sun's energy and channel it to the tower below. However, a miscalculation resulted in a surge of energy that escaped into the land, triggering an earthquake of unprecedented violence. The calamity that ushered in the Fourth Umbral Era. In the blink of an eye, the mighty Allagan Empire was laid to waste. Yet, even as the Crystal Tower was sinking into the earth, the technologist Amon, now Emperor Sunday's closest aide, invoked powerful magics and halted the flow of time. Every soul within the structure, the Emperor included, was placed in a deep slumber, remaining in that state until the time was ripe to awaken. After a millennia of lying dormant, Dalamud was summoned back to Earth as a part of Project Meteor, orchestrated by the Garlean Empire, triggering the Seventh Umbral Calamity and causing the Crystal Tower to re-emerge. At that moment, Emperor Sunday awakened to resume his conquest of the world. Unei and Doga tell the expedition that their only purpose for existence is to put an end to Sunday's madness, a mantle they inherited from their namesakes, the true Unei and Doga. Similarly to Sunday, they too awoke within the Crystal Tower and have since then been seeking worthy allies to help them lay Sunday low, their search now finally over, having found an adventurer capable of braving the labyrinth of the ancients. Together the party resolves to aid Unei and Doga in their quest to vanquish Sunday's dark ambitions, locking the tower's ancient secrets away. As the rest of the party leaves to make preparations, Graha stays behind to ask Unei and Doga about his right eye, which shines bright red, just like the eyes of Unei and Doga. Doga comforts him by explaining that the clones are unable to have children, and that since he inherited the eye from his father, he is not a clone. However, the eye is undeniably a link to ancient Alak, since the trait manifests only in those possessed of royal blood. Even though Doga cannot explain why the eye runs in Graha's line, Doga believes that the answers may lie within the tower, and that all will be revealed in due time. Just like with the Labyrinth of the Ancients, the adventurer braves the Circus Tower ahead of the others. He faces Sunday at the top of the spire, along with fellow adventurers, and together they defeat him. As the others catch up, a rift to the world of darkness, the Void, starts tearing into reality. Unei and Doga explain that the power Sunday sought to obtain comes from the Void, and that the true nature of that power consists of an army of Voidsent. In exchange for their allegiance, Sunday entered into an unholy covenant, opening a gate through which the Voidsent could freely enter their world. The covenant is still in effect, but Unei and Doga believe they can annul it by virtue of their royal lineage. As Unei and Doga start to close the rift, Nero's power meter begins to pick up extraordinary power ratings that greatly surpass even that of the Ultima weapon. A voice emerges from the void, telling them the covenant is everlasting and cannot be undone. Suddenly, dark Unei and Doga clones appear all around them, triggering a vision by the echo. The adventurer sees Sunday, addressing the clones from his throne. He tells them Meracidia, a continent to the south, has been brought into the fold, and that the world shall soon be united under Allagan rule. And yet, with every dream that becomes a reality, the memory of death grows ever more vivid to Sunday, leading him to believe he no longer dreams of dominating the world, but rather of destroying it, leaving nothing behind. To this end, Sunday hoped to harvest more power, so that the gate to the void might be thrown full open, letting the cloud of darkness engulf the world. As the adventurer returns to his senses, the expedition is forced to do battle with a seemingly endless array of dark clones. In the process, Doga is captured by the Void Gate and sucked into the world of darkness, the same fate awaiting Une. Upon seeing this, Nero feels obliged to jump to their rescue, since without their power, there's no way to master the darkness. His true ambition is coming to light. However, his act of selfish heroism only results in him getting sucked into the void along with the clones. The voice from the gate introduces itself as the Cloud of Darkness, demanding that the Covenant be honored before disappearing without a trace. Without the gate, the dark clones fall lifeless to the ground. By bringing in a team of engineers to study the tower's secrets, Cid hopes to once again open the gateway to the void, so that they might neutralize the threat and rescue their comrades. As G'raha arrives at the top of the spire to meet with Cid, with the adventurer in tow, the three of them marvel at Sunday's throne and imagine what could have been if ancient Allag hadn't fallen. G'raha explains that according to his findings, warriors of old took up swords against Allag in response to Sunday's war of domination. But as these warriors moved towards Allag's heart for the kill, Sunday lashed out in anger, emptying all of the sun's power held within Dalamud into the circus tower at once, resulting in the fourth umbral calamity. Cid had already learned of the cause of the calamity from Une and Doga, but he had no idea that rebellion had incited Sunday to rashness. Cid is once again impressed by G'raha's knowledge of Allagan history, although G'raha can't seem to remember where he learned such things. Once preparations are complete, Cid's ironworks activate a machine capable of prying the Void Gate open, letting the adventurer lead a group of heroes into the rift. Inside the gate, the adventurer faces off against the Cloud of Darkness, ultimately defeating its physical form, even though he is unable to destroy it completely. Once the battle is over, Doga, Une, and Nero present themselves to the adventurer and G'raha. Although Une is unconscious, and Nero's body is having a visibly hard time staving off the darkness. While in the rift, Nero has defended the clones valiantly, although he warns them not to mistake his actions for kindness, since he ultimately hopes to make use of them. Une regains consciousness and is happy to see their allies with him. Nevertheless, it is but a short reprieve, since the Cloud of Darkness makes its presence felt once more. The Cloud of Darkness assaults G'raha, but cannot harm him, the reason being that he is protected by Sunday's blood and the Covenant. This confirms G'raha's royal lineage and explains why the Royal Eye runs in his line, granting him authority over the Crystal Tower. However, the Crystal Tower is not likely to recognize him as Allagan, since his true power still lies dormant. Une and Doga share their blood with G'raha to bolster the Allagan presence within him, so that he might gain control of the tower. G'raha accepts their offering, his other eye now opening up to its true potential. The adventurer, G'raha, and Nero make their escape, while Une and Doga stay behind to keep the Cloud of Darkness in check, making amends for the blood-steeped history of their lineage. On the way out of the void, Nero's power is all but spent. Not being able to make the passage on his own, he tells the others to go, since he will not suffer his lessers coming to his aid. The darkness is suddenly dispelled from Nero by the clones, allowing him to make his escape just in the nick of time. Much to Nero's dismay, however, he is pulled from the void by none other than Cid, putting him in his debt. The expedition rejoices over the safe return of those that entered the rift, even though Une and Doga had opted to stay behind. Having just survived a harrowing ordeal, the expedition decides to return to the tower at a later date to seal its fate. Upon exiting the tower, however, G'raha stays behind, his Allagan blood having awakened him to his calling. He tells them that in the wake of the fourth Umbral calamity, people still hope the Crystal Tower might be a force of good in the world. In response to these wishes, Princess Salina, the only member of the royal family to have survived the calamity, offered up her blood and memories to whom she trusted, one of them being G'raha's forebearer. For millennia, the royal bloodline grew thin, but before the last drop could vanish from the realm, the memory of all this returned to G'raha. And now, he feels he must fulfill the wish of the ancients, making the tower shine forth as a new beacon of hope. Cid cautions G'raha that the tower is too dangerous since they lack the technological understanding necessary to use it correctly. G'raha shares Cid's concerns, but worries that waiting until such a time that the world reaches the same heights as ancient Allag would see the royal blood having thinned out beyond recognition, thereby making them lose the means to control the tower. In order to solve this problem, G'raha intends to put the tower into a deep sleep, just like Amon had before him. G'raha himself slumbering within the tower until such a time that men once again rival the Allagans in knowledge. At that time, G'raha will guide them, making the wishes of the ancients come true. Seeing that they can't talk him out of it, the members of the expedition wish G'raha all the best and tell him they will do their best so that the world may once again reach those same heights of knowledge. G'raha thanks them and tells the adventurer he looks forward to learning of his exploits, as they will be written in the annals of history, believing his heroism to become the star by which he himself will chart his course when he awakes. Finally, G'raha bids his friends farewell and closes the Golden Gate behind him, locking it shut so that none may enter until the time is right. Back at the 8 Sentinels, Nero's power meter detects that the Crystal Tower slumbers once more, prompting him to explore other possibilities to pursue his ambitions. Nero throws his power meter down into a deep chasm, a new dawn breaking in his life. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to like the video and share it with all your friends. Your friends would love this video. This video could even help you make some new friends. And if you can't make any friends, you could always watch this video again, or check out some of our other Final Fantasy videos. And don't forget to subscribe and click that bell so you won't miss out on any of our videos in the future. See you next time. Kaka!